Well, welcome to another busy night of all things people, power, and politics, from the Motor City to the Beltway and beyond. So much going on. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan giving his last State of the City address just hours ago, months before voters choose his replacement, and shifting his focus fully to the race for governor. We're diving into what he had to say tonight. But there's another really important story that you need to know about at this hour, one that could impact millions of families across the country. Perhaps your friends, your family, neighbors. All of us here in Metro Detroit. The U.S. Department of Agriculture stopping deliveries of $500 million worth of food supplies, fresh food. And that has one Metro Detroit food bank saying they'll have a massive shortfall of food. We're taking a closer look at this, plus gleaners with how you can help give to them to support the families in our community that need you the most. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. Well, we begin tonight with that address by Mayor Mike Duggan, his final State of the City address as he gets ready to leave the top job in the city and run for the top job in the state. And by the way, all of what happens in Detroit and Michigan is affected by what's happening in D.C. You know that. We're going to connect those dots with an all-star panel coming up in just a few minutes. Now, if you're the mayor of a major American city or running for the governor's mansion, how will you work with the Trump administration? That's the question. We're going to dive in. You know the mayor is making that independent bid for governor, and voters will choose a new mayor this November in Detroit. Duggan spent a lot of time tonight at the beginning reflecting on where Detroit was when he took office and the progress that's been made since. He said the partnership with City Council is what made all the magic happen, and has this message for people who are worried about their jobs, while also alluding to the trade war between the U.S. and Canada. Take a listen.
There are jobs today for every Detroiter looking for work. We know that there is a softening in the manufacturing market, and I hope the President and Canada work out the issues soon. But the underlying economy in Detroit is strong, and we are there for you if your job is insecure. 9 centers in every corner of the city. In just the last 3 years, we got more than 2,500 Detroiters full-time jobs through the training and placement in Detroit at Work. And one of the things I'm proudest of is 1,200 of them had been unemployed for more than 6 months. People have been given up hope. We put them into training programs with good-paying jobs.
He said he wasn't going to talk about the governor's race, but guess what? This is definitely something that everybody had in their mind as he was speaking. It was kind of a report card, a progress report, but a report card of how he did in the last decade. He also talked about the city's blight fight, talking about the number of homes, not only the homes that were demolished, but also renovated. Duggan said while there's more work to be done, the progress is clear, and he goes by the numbers right here.
12 years, we're removing the blight of abandoned houses. When we started, 47,000 owned by the land bank. 2019, we're down to 20,000, and as of today, we're down to 2,900. By the end of the year, we will be down to 1,000 vacant houses owned by the land bank. We're moving the blight.
Duggan also looked ahead to Detroit moving forward, pointing at various projects that are happening that will not only bring jobs, but affordable housing to Detroit. And he said that growth is going to keep on coming.
We have enough construction and projects that's going to carry this city for the next 5 years. That's because all of these people have been working together. It hasn't been one person. If I've done one thing, it's I've gotten people to work together instead of fighting with each other, because the turnaround was never that far away. And so I showed you before, and I'm again talking to our employees who are worried about your long-term prospects, about the fact that we've gained 7% a year for 11 straight years. You can see we dipped in the COVID year, we came right back up. But if we just keep going for the next 5 years, you're going to be looking at $660 million, another $200 million in revenue. And the parts of the city we haven't gotten to yet, and there are parts of the city we haven't gotten to yet. Over the next 5 years, the city government is going to have the ability to reach the folks who have still been forgotten.
So I asked you on social media what you thought about Mayor Duggan's biggest accomplishments. What is his legacy? Here's what some of you told me. Kim says Duggan has spent the last 10 years bringing up Detroit to be a city with a future. Good things continue to happen. There's new positivity with young people. Roy says creating a sense of cohesion and forward momentum, as well as repositioning the city as a community on the rise without losing authenticity. And Michael wrote to me saying turning Detroit from a punchline on late night talk shows into America's greatest second chance success story. story. Detroit's race for mayor, a crowded race for governor. Oh yeah, both offices having to work with the federal government. A lot going on in our political landscape right now. And that means there's only one man to talk to about what this all means. That's Oakland University professor, of course, Dave Dulio, and another man who has his hand on the pulse of what's going on in Detroit. We're talking about Sam Robinson with Detroit 1 Million. By the way, that's a Substack that you should look at when you go on your social media pages. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks.
You just came from the speech. Give us an idea as to what the reaction was as soon as the speech wrapped up.
A lot of folks said this is a mayor running for governor. The governor's staff told reporters before today, don't expect a campaign stump speech. We did see the mayor on social media promoting his final State of the City address tonight. A lot of folks are agreeing with the governor, saying, look at how far we've come. Look at the progress with, you got the riverfront, these new developments. You see the Center of Innovation. You have the new plants and manufacturing sites going up. But who can keep that momentum going is, I think, the question that people are wondering tonight.
Dave, I find it fascinating. You've seen so many of these types of speeches from State of the Unions, State of the State, State of the City. Someone can say, as long as the day is long, to say, I'm not running for, this is not what this is about. I'm here to talk about the city. This was clearly a report card, wasn't it?
Oh, no doubt. And not only was it a report card, we'll mix metaphors and say it was a victory lap, right? I mean, there was a lot in there about look how bad it was before I got elected and look how great it is now. And that is, without question, a launch pad to a 2026 gubernatorial campaign.
When you look at this mayor and how he does these addresses, he really tries to hit some of those really hot button issues that affect people. How I live my life, garbage pickup, police response times, all of those things. Sam, as a journalist, would you objectively say he gets a high mark for his 10 years in office?
I think, no matter who you talk to, even his harshest critics will acknowledge the reality that, yes, a lot of city services, entertainment spaces and venues, these new buildings going up, and the old derelict buildings coming down. A lot has been made about, the demolition Duggan administration. But yeah, I don't think it's possible to say that the city isn't in a better place than it was 10 years ago.
This is not just a victory lap, perhaps, for this particular man who's running for governor, but it certainly is not being joined with a bunch of Democrats who get to follow Duggan on that victory lap. He has kind of severed the ties and said, I'm an independent now. What do you make of that?
In his run for governor?
In a run for governor.
Yes, I think that he's trying to, well, let's go back to his speech.
Yeah.
Pragmatic, get the lights turned on, fund the police, right? Let's make sure that they show up when there's an emergency. It was, let's stop fighting. It was predictability over chaos, right? Which is what the American people hate about politics right now and have always hated about politics.
Dive into that for a moment, both of you. Chaos. He's saying, look, I help people work together. He's kind of putting a little jab at what's going on in the political world outside of Detroit.
I mean, us versus them, he talks about all the time. Right around the time of the bankruptcy, he today said, I don't want to give my successor much advice, but I will say I hope they continue the tradition of having the city council members sit behind him during around the time of the bankruptcy. It was literally Detroit versus everybody. It is now an us and them, working with business leaders who he thanked, Dan Gilbert, the Illiches.
Absolutely. He had the city council behind him, which is a small thing, but it says a lot, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. And he went through a lot of the folks that he had to thank, private sector, public sector, the workers in the city, right, that were that not necessarily supported him, but supported the city throughout the tough years. And I think, yeah, he's taken a shot at both Lansing and Washington when he says that we need predictability over chaos, and we need to stop the infighting, stop the bickering, and work together. And I think that's where the report card comes in too.
Let's talk about the pendulum, because Americans, we crave one thing and we get it, we vote for it, and then the pendulum goes the other way. Is he correct in predicting that people want more cohesiveness? They want more synchrony and less acrimony? Is that something that people want?
Without a doubt. And I also think that there's another element to it. We had some polling just a couple weeks ago that showed the Democratic Party nationally is rated as at a low point in its history. country. 29% of Americans have a favorable view of the Democratic Party. 36% have a favorable view of the Republican Party. So if there's ever a time for an independent run for governor, it's now.
A lot of people are saying that you're throwing this election over to the Republicans by running as an independent. That's some old school pollsters who say that. I think people who have seen the political landscape can see that there's a prescription for something else being lined up. Would you agree with that, Sam?
I would, and I think if John James or Eric Nesbitt, for that matter, no disrespect to them, if they're the gubernatorial candidates for Republicans, I do see Duggan taking from some Republican voters, some who I've talked to. The lawmakers in Lansing will say, no, they're not. We're never going to do that. But, you know, I just talk to people on the ground that say, yeah, I voted for Trump, and I would vote for Duggan. You see them in the comments on Facebook and on your social media accounts.
Yeah, no doubt.
Predictability is no longer a thing. We cannot look at playbooks from 15 years ago and predict the future, right?
No, not at all, and especially in a tumultuous administration that we have right now. It seems like things change, not just on a weekly or daily basis, but almost hour by hour. And I think that not only business leaders, but you know, other elected officials and frankly citizens are looking for some predictability and some normalcy. And you know, when you've got two sides, two political parties that are just constantly going after each other, the opening is there for somebody to come in and say, hey, look, let's work together and fix some problems.
With this the Democrats in Congress, the Republicans in Congress in Washington, this president, and what's going on in the state and the city, I doubt that we're going to find a sense of cohesiveness, but that's why we come back every night to talk about how people want to get there. Dave Dulio, good to see you as always. Sam, thank you so much. Sam Robinson. Our conversation about Mayor Duggan's State of the City is just getting started. A journalist, a pastor, and a businessman, all in the hot seat next on The Pulse. We'll be right back. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Our all-star panel is ready to talk about Mayor Mike Duggan's last State of the City for Detroit. Malachi Barrett with Bridge Detroit, Pastor Charles Williams II with King Solomon Church, and businessman Mark Lee are all here tonight. And we thank you all for joining us here. It's good to see you all.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to be hearing from Councilwoman Mary Waters in a moment as well. She was at the State of the City tonight. So many people, of course, know that what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington. I want to begin with you, Pastor, a little bit about what you're hearing about these USDA cuts. Food banks seeing a major cut in funding, and we know that there are 600,000 pounds of food that come to Michigan that are on pause or canceled right now. Your concerns?
I'm very concerned. I mean, the city of Detroit, 40% of the residents in the city, upwards of 50%, are living under the poverty line. My church, as well as churches across the city of Detroit, we open our churches up for food pantries. A lot of that food is USDA food from the pandemic all the way up into present. We've been giving out fruit and vegetables as well as meat. And so we are concerned because the lines are long in the city of Detroit when it comes to accessing healthy food in this community.
And Mark, we know that for a few years, the number of people who were trying to get this kind of food had gone down. There was a decline in the need, and now it's surged back up again. This is obviously a concern for many people in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Food insecurity continues to be an issue. And once you make these types of cutbacks, people, I mean, they want food. That's a basic need. And I think there's a Pastor hit the nail on the head. There's a strong need for it. We need to continue to service these individuals throughout the city of Detroit. And if we don't, it's going to continue to be a problem moving forward.
Let's talk about moving forward with the city of Detroit right now. This mayor, just hours ago, painting a pretty rosy picture of how much work has been done in the city of Detroit. Malachi Barrett, you've been covering the city of Detroit for years. Your take, I guess, a report card on his speech, if you will, tonight.
Yeah, I think these State of the City addresses are usually a good opportunity for the mayor to look back at the accomplishments. Obviously, he came in at a very difficult time for the city with bankruptcy. He kind of identified three big things that he wanted to address and how he did that, you know, whether people believe that or not. And that's violence, blight, and job opportunities, right? So part of the strategy around fixing those issues was kind of a defense for his tax incentive strategy. Recruit businesses to these open sites that were created partially through demolition and the city getting, acquiring sites primed for redevelopment, creating job centers for residents to come in. That grows the income tax base. Now you can hire more police officers and start to address some of that crime. And I think it was a victory lap for him to celebrate the accomplishments that he's done in partnership with the community over the last 12 years. He also said there are challenges yet to be solved. Neighborhoods being the main one. It's a big battle, he said, and got a little bit less attention in his speech than some of the big projects coming.
What didn't we hear, Reverend, in the speech that you wish you did?
Well, I think we're still looking for relief in the community, right? Relief in the neighborhoods. A lot of times when folks start thinking about what are you talking about? What do you mean when you need relief in the neighborhood? We give billions of dollars of tax incentives to folks downtown, yet have folks who have lived in the city of Detroit, who have paid their taxes for 20, 30, 40, 50 years have received that same relief. As a matter of fact, they won't be receiving any relief coming up because, as you well know, values just went up. That means taxes will go up, and there's still more incentives to go. And all of those incentives that he's been giving away for the last 12 years, guess what? The time is coming where the chickens will be coming home to roost, because folks are going to, those incentives are going to be released, and folks are going to be coming back to the table saying, I need more relief.
And then there has to be a source for that relief to come. Mark, we're going to get to you in a moment here about your thoughts on what needs to happen moving forward, but I do want to include a very important voice in our city. Councilwoman Mary Waters, who's been around for many years at the council, had this to say about what she hopes the next mayor of Detroit will bring to the city. Take a listen.
We're hoping for the next mayor to move the city forward, to pick up where this mayor has left off as it relates to housing, economic development, veterans, transportation. We've made some serious changes and investments in this city, but there's still much more work to do.
There is so much more work to do. Mark Lee, what are some of the things you're hearing from the business community about what needs to be done to help move the city forward?
Let's cut to the chase. Excuse me. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with the business community, particularly the small business community. You look at the relationship between Washington, D.C., and the talk of tariffs and everything else right now. When it comes to federal funding, there's concern about that. And so businesses really want to invest in the community. They want to continue to grow. Detroit has 62,000 small businesses. Let that sink in. That means close to 200,000 jobs rely on small businesses. Some of the small businesses want to invest and expand, but they're nervous because of all the policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. So I think the biggest concern is they want security, they want clarity, they want the opportunity to invest in the business, invest back into the communities, and again, hope to expand the economic base of Detroit.
Malachi, obviously, when you have security and you have some confidence in the economy or in your city or in the direction of this country, you're more willing to take risks and invest yourself. Are you noticing that right now when it comes to looking at the dichotomy between Michigan and then Washington and the politics of both? Well,
I will say that Duggan, one message I think he wanted to really make clear for folks was that the city's on steady financial footing for the future. There's $550 million in a reserve fund in case there's an economic downturn, and he's pointed to this momentum that's been building with development interest coming to the city. I think the challenge is going to be that we still have such a high property tax rate that, in the opinion of a lot of the economic folks that work for the mayor and will work for the next mayor, tax abatements are necessary to basically offer them a discount that makes it worth making that investment in the city. And there's a lot of frustration and I think some valid frustration about how much money is going toward some of these development projects. But I think that's going to be the challenge of the next mayor, is keeping the city on firm financial footing while also finding ways to reduce the property tax burden that makes it hard for people to live here. It also makes it hard for businesses to invest.
I'm so curious about what Reverend Williams thinks right now about the Trump administration working well with the next mayor of the city of Detroit and the next governor. How important and how critical is that in your mind?
You know, this administration is really just kind of governing by the fly by the seat of their pants. I mean, if you can find someone who has the leadership capability to figure out their way in there, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, look, the reality is in 2 years we'll be seeing a midterm. By the time we get a new mayor in, we don't know what Congress and the Senate will look like at that point. How much of a lame duck, realistically, President Trump will be. What we do need is good congressional leadership here in Detroit and in Michigan, as well as in the U.S. Senate. We've got Gary Peters getting ready to retire. Some people are saying that they want to see a change in the leadership that's in the congressional leadership here in Detroit. I mean, we're going to need the purse strings more so than we need the show in the White House.
And so, Mark Lee, you see Governor Whitmer not once but twice in the last month currying the favor of the Trump administration by, as one podcaster said, elbowing her way to the front of the room to talk to the president. How important is that relationship?
So you have to be at the table. We have to be at the table. You know, I know she's taking a lot of heat for that, but from a business perspective, you want to be at the table. You want to make sure you're talking the opportunities, make sure that your voice is being heard. And I understand what she's doing. And I think, you know, it's a smart move from her for her perspective. Again, I'm a business owner, and I want to make sure I continue to get the resources so I can invest in my business, invest in my city. And so you're going to have to figure out how to cross the aisle, so to speak, and certainly work with Washington, D.C. in terms of getting those federal funding, those federal dollars into the state of Michigan as well as to the city of Detroit.
What kind of person should be the next governor and the next mayor of the city of Detroit? Malachi, I'm not going to ask you your opinion, but rather what you're hearing and you're reporting.
Yeah, I mean, the people I talk to, they want a leader that has integrity, that has a real vision for the city, and that's something that's tangible, not just we're going to build housing, but where's the housing going? Who is it for?
Reverend, we have about 20 seconds left.
One thing he said is integrity. Look, we don't need nobody who's going to embarrass us. We've come a long way. And we certainly want to continue to go in an upward trajectory. So if you think you're going to embarrass us with parties and everything else, get out the race, or we'll get you out.
Mark Lee, what's important for Michigan right now moving forward?
Right now, we need a trusted leader. We want clarity. We want somebody who's going to be honest and transparent.
We're going to see who that person is. We have so many people throwing their hats in the ring for so many races that are right here in Michigan. We're not going anywhere. Too many people. But that's why we come back every single night to bring you the latest. We thank our panel for joining us. Mark, Esther, Malachi, thank you all for joining us. We touched on the halted food deliveries from the USDA. Next, we're talking to Gleaners about how it'll impact Metro Detroit families. You're watching The Pulse right here on Fox 2. It's people, power, and politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. So much going on in the political world, as always, including the latest on what many call a massive security fail. You heard about this? We're talking about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth texting plans for those military strikes in Yemen to a group chat in the app known as Signal that included a reporter. Hegseth denied it and tried to discredit the reporter, but the National Security Council said the string appears to be legit. And here's the thing, it comes after the Department of Defense told not to use mobile apps, including Signal, for DoD business because they aren't secure. That happened back in 2023. President Donald Trump is defending Hegseth and trashing the reporter, while a hearing on Capitol Hill with National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard got a little testy. Take a listen.
It's an app that a lot of people use, and somebody got on. I mean, I happen to know the guy's a total sleazebag. The Atlantic is a failed magazine. Does very, very poorly. Nobody gives a damn about it.
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then, if there was no classified material, share it with the committee.
Democrats want both Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz to resign because of this incident. And finally tonight, major news from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which impacts many Americans. You heard our panel talking about it right there at the big desk. The USDA halting $500 million worth of deliveries to food banks across the country, including right here in Metro Detroit. This means not only will shelves be less full, but the food families who need it most take home, well, I should say, they won't have as much nutritious stuff. That's the bottom line. So I want you to think produce, milk, proteins, all kinds of really important stuff. One of those food banks that will be impacted is Gleaners, which serves 5 counties in southeast Michigan. A spokesperson of the group was on Fox 2 Detroit Live, our streaming show. Earlier today, they talked about the impact it could have.
Every different food bank and pantry has a slightly different model. What that means for Gleaners particularly is that we will have a shortfall of 1.4 million pounds of food this year. And the unfortunate reality to that is if we are unable to fill that gap, that means 25,000 fewer households that we're able to support. Those are families, kids, seniors, veterans who are really looking to us for support to get balanced nutrition.
Now, Gleaner says these cuts make your donations even more vital to help those in need. If you can, give food, money, or your time. You can find out how to do that on the Gleaner's website right now. That is The Pulse for tonight. We thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Rup Raj. We'll see you tomorrow night.